my loyal subjects, it is indeed the month of August, and as ever, being an old man, my mind is ever drawn to anniversaries. And what greater anniversary can there be but that which does mark the supremacy of the House of Tudor? For it was upon the 22nd of August, in that year of 1485, that great battle was fought upon the field at Bosworth, where my father, Henry, 2nd Earl of Richmond, did join in battle with that usurper, Richard III of the House of York. It is the war which in your time is more popularly known as the War of the Roses, but in truth, and in my time, was known as the War of the Cousins. For it is a war that did encompass two rival factions of the royal family. My forebear, my ancestor, King Henry VI of the House of Lancaster, he had been king for many years, having come to the throne when but a small boy, only a matter of months old. When he did grow, it became apparent to all that King Henry VI of that name was disordered, had a distemper, had a malady, a confusion of the mind, which many thought did render him incapable of discharging the duties of king. 'Twas then, that the other members of the royal family did join together to discuss what the future should hold. Those royal personages, those of the House of Lancaster and those of the House of York, did meet together to discuss who should sit upon the throne due to the incapacity of King Henry VI. That meeting became a violent argument. That meeting did in truth become the War of the Cousins, where those who supported the claim of the House of Lancaster did fight against those who supported the claim of the House of York. I'm told that in your time, those fellows who do live in the north of England, the Northerns, those who live in Lancashire, and those who live in Yorkshire do, to the present day, entertain great animosity between each other. For York is symbolized by the white rose, and Lancashire by the red rose. And I do understand that in modern times, that War of the Roses is said to be alive and well. But take heed. That War of the Roses has absolutely nothing to do with the geographical areas of Lancashire and Yorkshire. It was the royal houses. It could quite easily be the war against Gloucester and Kent. It happened to be Lancaster and York. It is true that those two great houses did choose, and their followers did choose, upon which side they would fight by the taking of roses, the red of Lancaster and the white of York, and indeed those counties today do bear those emblems. But the War of the Roses, the War of the Cousins, did go much deeper than the counties in the north. All across the realm, great noble houses divided in favour of one or the other. Brother fought against brother, family fought against family. For in excess of 30 years, this great realm of England was riven by that War of the Roses. It is indeed true. 'Twas the incapacity of Henry VI that did give rise to this great conflict. And in the early stages of that war, the War of the Cousins, Henry, removed from the throne, was incarcerated in the Tower for his own protection. But thence, on one sad day, lost at prayer in his chapel, he was stabbed to death. Thus died Henry VI of the House of Lancaster. We know not, in truth, who did murder the king, but let me state, 'twas Edward IV of the House of York who became king. It is a feature of the House of York, these Yorkists, claimants to the throne, they did countenance violence and murder. Edward IV did indeed cut his way to the throne. He did indeed have his own brother, the Duke of Clarence, drowned. No less did Edward's brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, prove that he too was a man of blood. For as the war did wax and wane across the realm of England, as each of the houses sought dominance, it was indeed, as time went on, the House of York that did reign supreme, and when King Edward IV did die, and was gathered unto God, and did receive whatever reward a man whose hands dripped with blood should receive, the crown did pass to his young son, a boy of 12, King Edward V. But it was the skullduggery of their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who did contrive to have the new boy king and his even younger brother, the Duke of York, cast as bastards. That Gloucester did ascend to the throne as King Richard III. And thence those two young boys, held for safety in the Tower, did disappear and were ne'er seen again. King Richard III, an evil man, a man whose hands dripped with blood like so many of the Yorkists. He did cut his way to the throne, and my father, Henry, Earl of Richmond, in France, did hear of the unpopularity of this Yorkist king. My father, in direct line descent through John of Gaunt to King Edward III, a royal line, royal blood. 'Tis true, there are many of the Plantagenets who would claim to have greater line of descent. But my father, Henry, Earl of Richmond, was now the titular head of the House of Lancaster. And so it was in 1485 that my father did land with an army at Milford Haven in Wales, that great principality of Wales, the land of his birth, and thence did march through the English Midlands towards London to give battle to that usurper Richard III. As my father with his army marched across the Midlands towards London, Richard, having heard of my father's advances, did muster his forces, which in truth did outnumber those of my father, and they true marched northwest towards the Midlands. And it was upon the field of Bosworth, on that 22nd of August, 1485, that the two armies did face one another. 'Tis true, Richard's army did outnumber that of my father, but in truth, the way these troops were managed, how they were deployed, how they were handled, was most ineffective. It was my father's troops and his commander, Oxford, who did put many royal troops to the sword. 'Tis then the impetuous Richard, wishing to draw the proceedings to a halt, did strike out from his position and did charge across the battlefield towards the direction of my father, with the intention of killing my father, the Earl of Richmond, and thence bringing the battle to an end. 'Twas then the Stanleys, who in truth had stood to one side to observe of the proceedings and to see how the day did go, they did intervene on the side of my father. Richard and his knights were surrounded, and Richard was put to the sword. As the battle ceased, the body of fallen Richard was found. His body was stripped naked, with air but a clout to cover his privy members. His naked corpse, placed across a horse, was paraded about the battlefield, so all could see that Richard the usurper was dead. And thence the very crown of England was picked from the mud, was placed upon the head of my father, and my father was proclaimed King Henry, the seventh of that name, the first king of the House of Tudor. England had been riven for in excess of 30 years by this bloody war of the cousins. Now it had been brought to an end, and finally the throne was in the rightful hands of the House of Lancaster. My father, a wise man, having won his crown by feat of arms, did desire England to be at peace, and thus he did take as his wife a princess of the House of York, Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV, niece of the usurper Richard, and sister to those disappeared princes in the Tower. Thus, by the union of the House of Lancaster and York, England did come to peace. And with the union of those two great symbols, the red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York, the Tudor rose was born. I, King Henry, the eighth of that name, the son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, I am indeed that very living rose of England. And thus, my loyal subjects, as the 22nd of August does draw near, be pleased to spare a thought for those great events upon the field of Bosworth, upon the 22nd of August, 1485. And may the Lord our God bless and keep you, the people of England. For the subscriber giveaway. The competition is open to all subscribers, old and new alike. Once I reach 250 subscribers on my YouTube channel, I will choose one of those subscribers at random out of that 250 to receive a special prize. The prize is made up of this delightful figure, somebody you may recognise. Together with this prize of this delightful figure, there'll be a selection of merchandise from my theatre show, Divorced, Beheaded, Died. The competition is open to all loyal subjects, where they may be across the globe. All you have to do to have a chance of winning is to subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking the link below. So whether you've been subscribing to my YouTube channel since the beginning, or whether you have just subscribed, you all have an equal chance of winning this wonderful prize. And so, good luck, and thank you all, my loyal and most well-beloved subjects, for your continued support. Cheers.